Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. I'm your instructor for the course of Stylistics, Neelam Almas. I've been teaching English literature at the postgraduate level for about 8 years, and my specializing area is English literature. I've been doing MS English, and now I'm doing my PhD in English, and subjects that I teach at the MA English and the MS English level include postmodern literature, stylistics, the study of the modern and classical novel, romantic and modern poetry. The course that I'm going to teach you through this lecture is called Stylistics. The aim of the course is that it would enable you to understand the literary style and the language of writings. Normally, we look at the texts, specifically literary texts, with reference to their theme or the ideas that the writers present to us. Our basic concern is to find out what the text is about, whereas this subject, stylistics, will introduce you to the importance and the significance of the literary style, the language of the writers, and the literary devices and techniques that the writers employ. Now, keeping in view our traditional approach of reading English literature, either poems or novels or the short stories, we usually focus on the ideas that the writers have presented before us through their works. We focus our attention on the characters, the situation, and the messages that are inherent within the texts. Whereas literary writings are distinct from the ordinary writing. For example, the discourse of news, the discourse in advertisement, all these expressions differ from each other on the basis of the language, on the basis of the style. It is important that we observe what are the differences that make literary writing distinct and unusual from the ordinary writing, and how the literary expressions differ from other literary expressions, or for instance, how one writer's style of writing differentiates him or makes him stand apart from the works of other writers. This is what stylistics will explain to you. This is what the subject of stylistics would introduce to you. Now, this subject would introduce you to a world where you would interact with the text, you would scrutinize the text, you will also observe in detail what are the specific parts of a text that function in a particular way and convey the messages to the readers, that is, the audience of the text. Keeping in view our first lecture, that is on the subject of stylistics, I first feel that you must understand in what particular ways or in which particular meanings do we take the word stylistics. Or, for example, as the very word stylistics carries in it the word style. Now, the concept of style is very significant for conveying a message. You talk in a particular way, you talk in a specific way to communicate something that will communicate, for example, your emotions. You will talk in a particular way using a particular language to communicate a wish or to communicate a desire. Now, the use of words and language depends upon the functions and the nature of the subject that you want to communicate or convey to the reader too. For instance, when we refer to particular writers' styles, we distinguish them on the distinctive qualities that we notice in their works. Being students of literature, you all might be familiar with how we remember and recognize the particular writers that we have studied in our courses. For example, in your study of the poetry of Milton, you would have noticed Milton's grand style, using eloquent, elevated, grand language. Milton distinguishes his style of poetry from the style of other poets of not only his own time, but also other times too. Similarly, Jonathan Swift's work being observed as a satirical work. His focus is on satire. So you recognize Jonathan Swift's style as satirical style. Similarly, if you read Alexander Pope's poetry, you find in him the mock heroic style. So on the basis of certain distinct qualities, you remember those authors and you focus on your reading of those texts with particular reference to the writer's style. Similarly, reading Bacon's prose, one distinct quality of his work and writing that stands out and touches the reader is his aphoristic or epigrammatic style. Now, keeping in view the fact that when we look at certain writers' works, we remember a particular or distinct quality of the style of their writing. Now, this fact and this evidence reveals the importance of stylistics, that how important the literary style is. Why and how does a writer make a particular effort to create his distinct mark in literary circles on the basis of his style? Now that the importance of style is evident as the literary texts are concerned, we notice that a style is limited not only to a particular person or author, but also we think and we feel that particular eras as well as ages are also known to be evidence of a particular style in writing. For example, we associate a particular style of writing with the language habits and the style of writing of particular writers and group of people who belong to a particular age or who belong to a particular era. For instance, the style, that is the dramatic style of the Elizabethan dramatists, or the particular style of poetry writing that is distinctive of the qualities of the Romantic poets' works. Similarly, if you come out of your literary observations, you observe that the style of news reporting is different from the style of poetry. Similarly, the official documents like leaves, applications, and the official documents in the form of the recording of the minutes of meeting, they all operate on certain distinct principles which distinguish their writing from the writing of the literary works. So, the understanding of the general importance of style of writing shows to us that the style of literary writing needs to be analyzed with great care, with great clarity, and also with great depth. So, this discussion about the importance of literary styles, writing styles, importance of writers creating particular language and using it in a particular way that is formal, that might be humorous, that might be critical, satirical, denotes that there is a need of the understanding of the style of literary works. That is why this particular course has been designed to introduce you to the importance of the literary style. Keeping in view the importance of the course of stylistics, we expect that through our discussion in the course, this discussion would enable you to understand the importance and the functions of style of the literary works. Now, the focus is on the understanding of the functions of the language and the functions of style. It means that through the understanding of this course, you will know how important style is to convey a particular meaning and to be apt and adequate to have a particular impact upon the reader. Apart from that, after the study of this course, you will be able to analyze any literary text, either poetry, prose, drama, short fiction, or novels, on the basis of their writing style. This course will help you to perform detailed analysis of literary writings, and our focus will be to understand the methods and techniques to see which particular features in a text distinguish it from the ordinary writing. For example, if we are analyzing the literary works on the basis of their style and language, we will be able to compare those analysis of literary works with that of the ordinary writings that are not literary writings. Then, on a more broader level, the understanding of the subject of stylistics would not limit your understanding to just the understanding of literary texts. Now, the course is significant in these terms that it will enable you to expand your understanding of the literary texts and the understanding of the literary styles to other forms of expression as well. For example, different discourses like the news discourse, advertisements, political discourse or political speeches, and the religious sermons or speeches or even religious texts. All these other areas where discourse, language, and style is involved can be analyzed, understood, and interpreted through the application of the subject of stylistics. Now, the understanding of the course objectives as well as the understanding of the significance of the element of style in a literary work would help us better to focus on the learning as well as the understanding of the concepts involved in the course. To give you a broader view of what the course would introduce you to, or what do we expect to study and learn. First of all, we will look at the historical development of the subject or the field of stylistics, that how has this field or subject emerged? Where does it stand in the contemporary or the present literary discourse or the literary expressions and understandings? And from which particular mode or form has it evolved? Is it the development of the modern age, the 20th or 21st century? Or do we find stylistics or the use of the study of style of literary works in the classical ages as well? So, this is what basically today's lecture comprises of. Firstly, the introduction of the subject of stylistics, then the study of its development, its emergence as a field, a separate, distinct field or a separate subject of study in the literary writings as well as in the discipline of literature and linguistics. Now, first of all, the subject of stylistics, what it is, what does it study, or how does it approach or make sense of the texts? Look at the very word stylistics that encompasses within it the word style. And to know what the study of style involves, stylistics is the study of style used in literary and verbal language. And it also studies the effects the writer or speaker or the communicator wishes to present or communicate to its audience or the listeners. So, stylistics is the study of the literary style, which is worth noticing, which is worth discussion because of the functions of the literary texts. Stylistics involves the application of the concepts learned in the field of linguistics as well as the concepts involved in the study of literature. We apply the knowledge of linguistics as well as literature in order to arrive at broad, in-depth, rigorous, objective and scientific analysis of texts. If you look at the aspects covered in the field or the method of stylistics, you'll notice that the style part is related to how a text is constructed, how a text or a writing is formed. That is basically the language of the text. As I said earlier, that usually in our analysis of a poem or a story, we jump to the understanding of the text on the basis of what does the text say to us, what messages or themes or ideas does the text present to us, ignoring how the text is composed. Now, stylistics fills this gap between the understanding of the content of a work and the understanding of the style of a work. So, stylistics focuses on what the work is about, and also, most importantly, it focuses on how the work is constructed. There is a link between the message conveyed to the reader through a particular language, through a particular style. Now, what and how of a text mean what is the message of a text, the theme of the text, the ideas that the text contains, and how is the style, the form, the language that has been employed in a particular way to convey those messages or those themes. So, if literary criticism was concerned with what the text is about, now the subject of stylistics is concerned with how the text is constructed, which particular elements does the text employ or make use of to convey the message and the theme of the writer. Looking at the morphological makeup of the word stylistics, we notice that it is composed of two parts. The first part relates to style, which is related to literature. The second part relates to linguistics. So if you divide the very word stylistics into two parts, you notice that literature and linguistics both are needed to make up the word stylistics, as style is what literature contains in the form of poetic style, in the form of prose style, as well as the second part of the word stylistics makes it relate to linguistics. So stylistics depends upon both literary criticism and linguistics for its interpretation of the texts, for the explanation of the text, and for the understanding of the text. So it means that it would draw help from the theories and development taking place in linguistics. Also, it will draw help from the development taking place in the field of literary criticism. So it is bringing the two fields together that have been set apart earlier, literature and linguistics. So it's sort of a bridge that would help us to analyze objectively the literary writings and then expand our understanding of the text through the application of the techniques learned in these subjects to other fields of knowledge, other areas of knowledge. You can study films, you can study songs, you can study the advertisements or the news discourse with the help of the techniques learned for the analysis of literary texts, because the expression involves a use of language in a particular way. So you'll be able to learn how different fields of the life make use of language in a particular way, what laws govern the language usage. Stylistics is a practical subject because it enables you to tackle texts from the point of view of an analyst, from the point of view of a critic who will be performing the analysis of the works of art, that is literature. So we refer to stylistics as a critical method that analyzes literary works on the basis of their style. And the stylisticians, just like you refer to those who study language as linguists, those who are experts in the study of style, they are referred to as stylisticians. Stylisticians focus on analyzing a writer's stylistic choices. Now, what are stylistic choices? Stylistic choices include the specific way of using a language. For example, the vocabulary or diction, the words chosen by a writer, they all become part of the style. They are the choices that a writer is making to convey a message. Apart from diction and vocabulary that makes the style or the particular language of a work, the work includes a particular way of making or using the syntax. Syntax, that is the word order in a sentence. How does a writer choose to form the sentences or statements? What is the placement of the words, phrases within a text or a poem? Has the writer inverted the syntax or the word order in a writing? Or he has chosen to use the regular method of syntax, like subject, verb and object, their placement and position. Apart from diction, vocabulary and the sentence structure, that is the syntax, stylistics also focuses on phonology. Now, phonology relates to the linguistics, the field linguistics, and phonology is the study of the sounds of language. Now, stylistics would also take into account a writer's use of phonological patterns or particular sound patterns within the text. For example, the rhyme, the end rhyme or the internal rhyme that creates a particular sound or creates particular sound effects for the readers in a poem. So, phonology as the study of the sounds of language is also the part of stylistic analysis. Also, the stylistic analysis involves the choices that a writer makes for the literary devices. Which particular literary devices or figurative language does a writer choose to convey his idea or message? For example, in poems, writers make use of metaphors, similes, personification, or euphemism. Now, these literary devices make up the work. They are part of a particular style that the writer is exhibiting. So, it is the job of stylistics to analyze, identify, and understand what function do these devices or stylistic choices perform in a literary work. When we objectively and scientifically pay close attention to literary texts to see what are the word choices of a writer, which particular diction, vocabulary, or words the writer has chosen, and why not some other. His writing wouldn't have been that much effective if a writer hadn't used particular words or expressions. Then we also focus on the word order in a sentence. We also focus on the sound patterns in a writing, particularly poems. And we, as the practitioners of stylistics, also locate and find out in a text the use of literary devices or figurative language. To quote Katie Wells, who has defined the goal of stylistics, would enable us to understand how the practitioners and experts rate the importance of stylistics for the study of literary texts. Katie Wells states in the Dictionary of Stylistics that the goal of stylistics is not simply to describe the formal features of the text for their own sake, but in order to show their functional significance for the interpretation of text. Now, focus on this definition, that Wells has said that the function of stylistics is not only to describe or to identify or point out what are the significant or salient or dominant features of literary writing, but apart from their identification, apart from locating them in a text, the stylisticians are concerned with the fact that what functions do these features perform in a writing, and how does the understanding of those features help us in the understanding and interpretation of the meaning of a text. Now, to explain it and to elaborate it more to you, I would refer back to the previous discussion, that is, that in the study of stylistics, the practitioner or the expert is concerned with identifying the vocabulary, the diction, the syntax or the word order, or the phonology or the sound patterns or the figurative devices like metaphors and similes used in a text. The purpose is not only to locate those elements and to claim that these are the elements which distinguish a literary writing from ordinary writing, but Katie Wells' explanation of stylistic states that we analyze these elements like figurative language, diction, vocabulary, or the phonological patterns in order to understand the meaning of the text. That is the core of the subject of stylistics. Or you can say that is the core objective of the subject of stylistics, that a stylistician would focus on the study of the features of style to understand what do these features contribute, or how do these features contribute to the meaning of the work, and our understanding of each feature that would be studied in great detail, like vocabulary, phonological patterning, sound patterning, or figurative language, will expand the understanding of the text, will expand the meaning of the text. So, you can say that the whole exercise of applying a stylistic analysis on a text, or learning to know how stylistics would enable us to study literature, would in fact expand our understanding of the literary writings. So this subject can be taken as a method, a technique to understand the texts in a better way, in order to comment upon the texts, their meaning, their significance, their merit, and it's an exercise for the sake of interpreting texts, knowing the meaning of the texts. So, we analyze texts through the analysis of the style of the writing. That is the basic function that stylistics performs, and also that is how stylistics helps the students of literature and the people involved in the study of literary texts, like literary critics, scholars, linguists, or stylisticians do. It would enable them to objectively analyze the texts. Stylistics is what owes its existence to literary criticism as well as to linguistics. As I said earlier, that the morphological makeup of the word stylistics shows that the style part depends upon literature, as it is the literary style that is the focus of analysis. And the second part, sticks, relates it to linguistics, where the words, their composition would be the focus of the analyst who is analyzing the literary texts. So as a discipline, stylistics links literary criticism to linguistics, and it cannot function independently. It cannot function having its autonomous domain or independent or separate identity. Now, stylistics cannot function without the cooperation of linguistics and literary criticism. So, in stylistic analysis, we apply the understanding of literary criticism as well as the understanding of linguistics to the understanding of style of a work. Stylistics also relies on literary criticism for the sake of judging the merit of a text, the value of a text, or to comment upon the quality of a text, and also the meaning of a text. And this all effort is done in order to arrive at a better understanding and interpretation of the texts. Stylistics is the discipline or study which will introduce the readers or the learners to the methods which are employed to explore the text and also to interact with the text. Now that I use the word exploring text or interacting with the text, it has specific meaning. Now, don't you feel that as a reader, you always respond to a text while you are reading a story? You feel in a particular way, the way a character is feeling, or because of the emotive language, the writer may have affected you, your thinking, as well as your response to the text. You feel happy, you feel sad due to the language and the style that the writer has employed. So it means that while reading a text, either a poem or a story, we, the readers, respond to the text, as it is an interaction between the work and the reader. So, in order to explain how we understand texts, how we respond to the texts, and how we are influenced or affected by the text, that is done by stylistic analysis. So, the analysis of style would convey that what are the particular qualities inherent in a text that a reader takes it in a particular way or responds to it in a particular way, develops specific feelings about the text, or he develops a particular stance or viewpoint after reading the text. So, stylistics is important not for the sake of understanding what a text means, but also to understand why a text means something particular to the reader, how the text has affected the reader or influenced the reader, because it is all because of the style or the technique used by a writer that a reader would be affected by a text. Take for example, just for the understanding of the concept, the way somebody addresses you in a speech. You feel that a speech of a particular politician or a person has affected you, influenced you. You begin to associate with the ideas. You feel emotionally charged with the atmosphere, because the speaker in his speech has used such a language that touches your emotions. So, same is the case with literary writings. Writers' word choices, writers' particular choices for figurative language, they also affect us emotionally. They also make us respond to their thoughts, respond to their writings. So, now that we understand the significance of style, that how effective a particular style could be for conveying thoughts and for affecting the readers, it is important that we understand how the method of analysis in stylistics would enable us to perform the analysis of texts. Stylistics as a field or discipline has emerged out of various other sources. For example, one of the sources that you might be familiar with is literary criticism. The movement and trends in literary criticism are what led to the logical development and extension of this subject of stylistics. Now, as a student of literature, you are familiar, or I expect you might be familiar, with what literary critics do. Literary critics analyze a literary work on the basis of its style in order to judge its value, its merit, and how has a writer contributed to the literary tradition, and what does he invent or reinvent in the form of work that he has produced. So, keeping in view the purpose of literary criticism, one thing that we notice is that literary critics mostly observe texts with reference to the author. So, the approach that they employ for the study of a text is author-centered, where they see a particular writing as an expression of a particular man's thought, that is the writer, and the writer's association with a particular region, political thoughts, philosophical thoughts, religious bent of mind, how they are reflected in our writing. So, literary critics do not look at text independently or from the reader's perspective. They look at a text or observe or analyze a text from the perspective of the author, that the associations of the author have a particular impact upon his writing, and the style or writing is the expression of the writer's feelings and experiences. Now, this can be seen as a limited way to look at a text for the purpose of analysis. That is why stylistics is introduced, because stylistics tries to eliminate the bias or the bent of a critic towards the personality of the writer, so that a text can be looked at independently, or a text could be analyzed in a way that exposes to the reader or the analyst the peculiarities or the features, elements used in a text. So that is why we see that literary criticism, if it was dependent upon the author's life to interpret and analyze his work, it could be eliminated with the help of stylistics, that stylistics would focus on the text, on the writing, and on the style that will be looked at independently of the author's personality, of the writer's associations. So, stylistics can be seen as a logical development of the moves within literary criticism that took place in the earlier 20th century that concentrate on the study of texts rather than authors. Now that we know what stylistics is and what is there in stylistics that links it to literature as well as linguistics, and more specifically, what links it with literary criticism and linguistics, we can move forward to the understanding of the history and the development of the subject of stylistics. As we look at the ancient times, as the literature produced in the classical times like Greek and Roman literature, there too was the concept of the importance and understanding of the literary styles. These areas, which were the focus for the analysts or the critics, they were rhetoric, poetics, and dialectics. In the classical age, one field or one area that focused on the creation of style was referred to as rhetoric, that is, the art of creating speech. Rhetoric is how powerfully, how effectively you can persuade people, you can make them understand your point of view, how effective your communication, either in writing or speech, would be to impress others, to convince others. So that is what is referred to as the rhetoric. So in the classical age or in the ancient Greece, the subject or the discipline of rhetoric was concerned with the study of style. And it was taught in the ancient Greece to train the speakers to create effective speeches. Here we notice that the development of stylistics owes its strength, its existence as well, to the field of rhetoric, to the art of rhetoric found in ancient Greece. Now, rhetoric is specifically concerned with the creation of effective speeches for the sake of argument, for the sake of convincing people, and for the sake of effectively impressing others in communication. Now, isn't it the same that the writers are doing through their works? Don't you notice that when you read the plays, poems, or short stories, you begin to feel the same way the writer or the character or the persona is feeling? That persuasion that was taught in ancient Greece for the sake of creating effective speeches, has been utilized in the present times also to create effective literary pieces, which we read in the form of plays, stories, and novels. So, stylistics existed in these domains. The second one is poetics. Poetics was concerned specifically with the creation of literary works. The famous work of Aristotle named Poetics, or titled as Poetics, is a pioneer work that demonstrates how the writing of epic, drama, or poetry in the form of lyric are different. So, poetics is what presents to us the principles that govern the creation or the writing of these three different forms of literary writing. Now, as a student of literature, you are aware that how the expression of these three genres or these three kinds of literary writings differs from each other. Epic is written in a particular mode or way. It is to be a poem of great length as well as serious, elevated theme and language. Then drama, it could be either a comedy or a tragedy. The laws that govern the writing of a drama involve the creation of dialogues, characters. And lyric, they are composed in a particular way where they give an impression of rhyme or a song to the reader. Now, observing the features that dominate these three genres, we see that in ancient Greece, the subject or the field that was used for teaching the writing of epic, drama, lyrics, or other literary expressions was referred to as poetics, the art of creating literary works, the principles that govern the creation of poetry or literary works. So, the third discipline that existed in ancient Greece, from where stylistics also takes inspiration, is referred to as dialectics. Dialectics is the study of creating and guiding dialogue, or a talk or a discussion. And see that the art of conversation, the art of discussion and talk is different from the poetic art or the creation of poetry, and also it is different from the techniques that govern the formation of speeches. So these three areas or three disciplines, which are rhetoric, the art of creating speech, poetics, the creation of poetry or the literary works, and thirdly, dialectics, that involves the principles that are important for the creation of discussion and dialogue. And the examples are included that we find Socrates' method, or it is also referred to as dialogical method, his method of teaching, his method of discussion, which has been utilized for the sake of governing how a solid and forceful use of language can be done in a discussion. So, rhetoric, poetics, and dialectics, they existed in ancient Greece, and stylistics owes its existence to these three fields. We can say that now that we know stylistics to be a modern development, or the subject of stylistics to be the development of the 20th century. But the study of style was found even in ancient Greece. Though stylistics is a subject or field that emerged in the 20th century and has been taking the help of linguistics and literary criticism for its analysis. But in the ancient times too, the critics and the writers were aware of the significance of style. That is why they had distinguished the style of writing on the basis of its uses, on the basis of its functions. For example, rhetoric or principles of speech are required where you have to convince people or you have to present an argument. Similarly, poetics explains those principles and laws which govern the creation of literary works. Similarly, dialectics as a field was created separately, where the art of creating dialogues, talks or discussions was taught. So, all these things are involved in stylistics. Now that we look at stylistics as a modern development or the development of the 20th century for the sake of understanding of literary styles, we see that stylistics has taken a lot from the three disciplines prevalent in the classical age in the form of rhetoric, poetics and dialectics. So, the further development of stylistics was based on the three above mentioned sources or disciplines. Poetics led to the development of literary criticism, and rhetoric and dialectics developed into stylistics. So, we can say that stylistics owes its existence to the classical methods and models of analysis of writings as well as the principles governing the creation of particular expressions, speeches, dialogues, discussions and literary expressions. So when the people in ancient Greece were aware that the three different modes of writing or expression need to be addressed differently, and there are certain principles which govern the creation of speeches, there are certain distinct principles which govern the creation of dialogue, or there would be certain separate distinctive features which would be required for the creation of poetry. It means that the awareness of style for the sake of expression, either expression in speech or expression in writing, or more specifically literary writing, has been valued even in past. And now that we live in the modern era, we have to make use of all the techniques, all the methods available and which are at our disposal to analyze literary texts and expand our understanding of literary texts on the other areas of knowledge, on the understanding of other discourses in the society. The development of stylistics can be seen in the present age to have taken so much from the 19th century as well. Just as we had a look at how rhetoric, poetics and dialectics helped us to form a distinctive field or discipline in the form of stylistics. We see that in the 19th century too, there were critics and there were contributions by them which strengthened or helped creating the field called stylistics. In the 19th century, literary criticism gained its popularity and significance, and in England, the text-based criticism, where the focus is on the writing, not the author. This text-based criticism, which was presented by famous critics named I.A. Richards and William Empson, this brought a new wave into literary criticism that just as I told you earlier, that the focus of literary criticism was to approach the text from the point of view of the author. Here, now in the 19th century, critics like Richards and Empson presented a new way of looking at the text that is referred to as text-based approach or text-based criticism. They rejected the particular way in which we associate the author's life or the author's personality with the text. So, I.A. Richards and William Empson rejected that approach in order to concentrate on the literary texts themselves. They think that the texts are important because they present particular meanings to the readers, not because the meanings are associated with their creators or the writers. Empson and Richards observed how readers were affected by those texts. And in this approach, we mention practical criticism. So what I.A. Richards and William Empson developed is today called practical criticism. It is practical criticism because it applies on the literary texts the methods and techniques which are not taking help from the life of the author. We are not looking at a text from the lens that what did the author intend to present to us in a text. We observe the text as a field, as independent entity, independent of its author. So that is why, because the application of literary theory as well as literary criticism is dependent upon the critic, this approach is referred to as practical criticism. So, Empson and Richards, they introduced in the 19th century a new method or approach of the analysis of literary texts. That analysis brings to light the significance of text. Now, how does it relate to stylistics? What does it has to contribute to the field of stylistics? That is the very focus on text, because as we know that stylistics is a discipline or a field that focuses on the text, on the work, on the style of a writing. So, keeping in view this information or this fact that I.A. Richards and Empson's criticism in the 19th century brought to light the significance of style, the significance of text. It strengthens stylistics. It strengthens the study of stylistics. So, keeping in view the fact that stylistics is a 20th century development, where we look at stylistics as a method of analysis in the 20th century, which is not something that has emerged suddenly or which does not develop over time or which does not develop gradually. So the survey of the development of stylistics shows to us that firstly we observed how the criticism and literary artistic creation in the ancient Greece with the development in the rhetoric, poetics and dialectics helped in the creation of stylistics, and also later the 19th century development in the scholarship of literary criticism, how it added something to literature and what it added to stylistics. It added to stylistics the significance of text, the significance of observing text independently, not taking into account what the author's intentions had been. So, in the study of the development of stylistics, we recognize the importance of classical critics or classical writers' contribution in the field of rhetoric, in the field of poetics and in the field of dialectics. Also, the 19th century practical criticism presented by I.A. Richards and William Empson. So this century, the 19th century, brought to light the importance of text. The practical criticism is also matched by a similar movement that was going on in USA. So what in England is known as practical criticism through the works of Richards and Empson is known in USA as new criticism, because the basic elements or the underlying elements of the approach are the same. It is matched by similar critical movement in the USA associated with Kenneth Brooks, who introduced the new criticism. And new criticism was based on the description of literary works as independent aesthetic objects. So these two things reveal that Kenneth Brooks also supported the theory of I.A. Richards and Empson that text is created with particular aesthetic or literary devices which function independently, which function exclusively, regardless of the author's bent of mind, personality, or time or era in which he lived. So the spirit of practical criticism introduced in America by Kenneth Brooks, and the introduction of practical criticism introduced in Britain by Empson and I.A. Richards is the same. So the same movement has been adopted by the American critics, and it has been extended, strengthened, and applied to the study of the analysis of works. So the significance of the understanding of style has increased. The awareness of the experts, linguists, literary critics, and scholars. Now their attention is now focused on exploring the style, exploring the mechanism and the techniques which govern the creation of a particular style. So, as we have seen the development of stylistics from the classical age through the study of dialectics, poetics, as well as the study of the practical criticism's development and the development of new criticism in USA. This is what would lead us to the development and creation of the subject and field called stylistics. So, to have a look at what we discussed today, firstly, we define what is style, and as a layman, we can judge how a particular person's speech or writing differs from another. This is what tells us the importance of style, that there are differences in style in writing too. Then we looked at how linguistics and literature both add or both contribute to the creation of stylistics, which is a method of analysis of texts. We will study this as a method of analysis of literary texts, but you can expand your understanding of writing style to the study of other disciplines too, to the study of other discourses too. So stylistics is a practical subject that is going to introduce you to the methods, techniques, and functions of a text, how a particular text is constructed, and what impact does the text have on the reader, and what meanings and messages are conveyed through a particular style of a writer. So that is all for today's lecture. I tried to summarize and explain the main points as well, and for the understanding of the course, which might be a new course to you, I will repeat the same for you when we meet the next time. Thank you.